Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
It is a joy to be alongside Global Citizen. It is a joy to be with you, Hans. Not running a 5K.
Exactly.
I'm going to do the painful pun because that was a short run, maybe 5K. It's a marathon, not a sprint, when we're getting to things like closing the digital divide. Now, I want to understand the scale of the problem. Can you articulate just how difficult it is right now for people to actually get access?
So the positive is that the last 4 or 5 years we've added 1 billion people more to be digitally included. It's roughly 5.5 billion in the world that is having access to internet. But it's 2.6 billion today that still are not connected. And we all know being connected, you're part of our society. You can work, you can get education, you can get digital information. It's so important. So out of 2.6 billion people that are not connected on this earth today, roughly 90% of them are actually covered by broadband in some kind of fashion.
90%?
90%. And then you ask me, so why are you not using it? So there are different problems in different countries, but basically you need to break it down in 3 things. The access to the technology, there has to be some broadband. There are still 400 or 500 million people on this earth that is outside the grid. And then the second part is affordability. You need to be able to afford it. And that's not only to have the plan for broadband or wireless, it's to have a device. In many countries, that's very expensive to have. And finally, it has to be usability. It has to be digital education, digital healthcare, and other societal important application to actually be important for digital inclusion. Many of us sitting here, we think that being digitally included, we can stream YouTube or something like that. But here we talk about, it shouldn't matter where you're born, where you come from, or where you live. You should have the same chance wherever you come from, and that you can have if you're digitally included. You can apply for a job, you can get the job, all of that, and you can learn which others that are inside the digital divide can do. So that's why the 2.6 billion people is very important to address together with countries and with companies to see that we're actually shrinking that.
When you look at the learning side of the equation, I know that's something that Verizon's doing deeply. So you already say, look, most people actually have access in some way of they've got broadband they could tap into. Why are you looking at the education piece in particular, and what are you doing about that here in the United States?
So if you look what Verizon is doing, we have Citizen Verizon, where we connect our business to things that are important in our society. One of those goals is to make digital inclusion for 10 million students. Getting students in the toughest areas where there are no connectivity to actually be part of it. So we have roughly 600 schools around the country where we have broadband into the school. We give them a device, and we give them digital STEM education. And they have to use them all 3, because then you really get to the root of it. So far, our commitment over 10 years is to educate 10 million students. We have done 7 million so far, and we have 6 years left. So we're going to do 10 million students in the low-income areas of the United States. Those schools are going to get broadband from us. And then I use my employees to be volunteers, so they are part of the journey as well, to educate, maintain equipment, etc. So for us, it's an ecosystem. But then you ask me, why are you doing it? It's my business. My business is doing broadband. My business is to get children to understand and use digital tools. And ultimately, they might remember Verizon, and then they're going to be a customer. Who knows?
Okay, so it's good business. But do your investors get that? Do they see the long-term benefits rather than, margin today, revenue today, profit today?
I think that when you go away from the acronyms that everybody talks about and talk about what you're doing that is part of your business, everybody understands it, because there are many acronyms like ESG, D&I, and all of that. Talk about what you're doing and why that is connected to your business. For me to get broadband, to get youth to use our service, and then educate themselves with STEM. They might even end up working for me. And we have been on to this Verizon Innovative Learning for more than 10 years, and we keep all the school, we continue with them, and many of the children that started with us in the first and the second grade, they are now actually have graduated, and they are out in the work life, and they will always remember how they get their part of being digitally included. So for us, this is an ecosystem that is so important for us, for our business, for being even more prosperous.
Can I just take a step back? And for a moment, as two Europeans who've come to the US,
how can you hear?
Why are we here? Well, because it's the biggest economy in the world.
Yes.
And there are 10 million children that need to be educated in STEM by you.
Yes.
In the biggest economy in the world.
Yes.
What is the US government doing about affordable connectivity? Because all I can see is actually they're pulling back on some of the funding for it.
So historically, and now we come into a little more complicated, historically US or still have ACP, which is affordable connectivity plans, meaning that low-income families can get a subsidy to get broadband or wireless connectivity. Now there's a discussion in the Congress if they're going to vote about it again. But I have talked to many governments, and there are different challenges in different countries, but doing subsidy for low-income families to getting connected is so important because they can be part of it. They can apply for a job. They can work remotely. I mean, there are so many remote works today, customer care, etc., and other works that you can do, consultancy, etc. So being part of that and having access to that makes it you can grow. You'll be part of our society. It's so important for the whole country, for GDP growth and all of that.
I mean, yes. And for me, that still needs to resonate so much that we're even talking about children here in the United States that need corporate philanthropy to be able to learn, to earn, and to be able to afford affordable devices. Where have you seen the most tangible benefits? You talked about how you're getting out there 10 million children. How already has some of the impact that you've thought about the digital divide already come to bear for productivity even here in the US?
I think here in the US, I think in the whole world, we saw coming out from COVID, I think that nobody could say that being connected is not important. Yeah. You couldn't do your work, you couldn't get information, you needed to be connected. And that is not in the US, it's all around the world. We saw countries like India flourishing to setting the digital divide very high up to see that they're connecting. They got the COVID subsidies to families, to mobile phones. Things we never thought could happen, but that triggered the whole world to think differently. And I usually say that the 21st century's infrastructure, that's mobility, broadband, and cloud. Because then you can bring down the cost and you can reach any person on this earth that wants to be part of our society.
Why is it your calling? Have you ever, since you've been in the world of telecoms, thought this is just something that is impossible to ignore? Or has it become worse and worse the more we've become seeing education necessary through technology, healthcare necessary through technology?
I think it started probably some 15, 20 years ago. I worked with the MDGs for the younger generation. That was the Millennium Development Goals. That was before the SDGs. And I went to Africa many times and I connected villages. And I remember vividly when I went to Ethiopia, for example, and we turned on internet in the community. The sheer, how positive, how happy they were, and how thankful we are now part of a society. We can now get information as what else. It started there. Then I have been my long life mission to see that whatever I can do from the platform I have and from the company I'm running, still with the technology and still with the business and strategy we have, I'm going to do everything to see that I can close the digital divide.
Let's talk about not just the digital divide here in the US. But there's a digital divide globally, and that's something that you in particular have tried to harness, tried to focus on, tried to reduce, and what you've got an eye on 1 billion people. Can you talk us through it?
Yeah, so we came out from that COVID, and I felt that now it's time for me to do something greater on the global basis. I decided together with World Economic Forum to set up a program over 5 years to see that we connect 1 billion people more. That started in the beginning of 21, and what it's all about is that not only getting broadband, as I said, it was about broadband, but it was either to be digital education, healthcare, or financially included digitally. Because those three things were so important coming out of COVID. So the only way we would count the new additions was actually if they are into that. And today we basically have 137 countries being part of it, 160 different champions doing commitments. My commitment is, or Verizon's commitment, is 10 million students that we're committing. And every company or government being part of it, they are committing to it. So that's how it started. We are now have 320 different programs around the world.
320?
320, I think that's a number. And we have passed 784 million people in less than two and a half years that has been included.
Can we just, 784 million in 2.5 years. Okay, so I'm playing devil's advocate, greenwashing.
Yeah.
Tell me how you measure this.
That was one of the first things. So we have actually a team, we have an auditing team from a very reputable auditing firm, auditing all the commitments done by governments or by the companies. Whatever they're committing and that they're succeeding with the result. We have quarterly reporting and we do an annual report. We are on a second report because we started 21, 22nd year 22 was the second year, and then 23 and 24. And as said, the goal is 1 billion. We're on 784. I think we're going to be ahead of the 5 years by far.
Is it 2.6 billion you said currently
this is part of the 2.6 billion that we're shrinking to 2.6 billion.
And how, if you're sat in this audience right now, you're feeling pretty inspired by you going out there, sticking your neck out on a 1 billion target, how can they help?
I think that any organization, any structure that is actually having part of the strategy to see that we're including people digitally on this earth can be part of it. And the beauty of it, it has to be sort of private-public because you cannot solve it yourself. I mean, usually building networks to 99% is private capital. It's guys like me building networks. When it comes to affordability, it actually works together with governments if you're going to subsidize and all of that. And then to create sort of usability, healthcare, education, or financial inclusion digitally, mainly that's owned by governments. So you have to do it crossover, if not, you're not going to succeed. So anyone that is working with those type of things and think that they can help and have an organization that commit, they are welcome to join the Edison Alliance that we're running in order to see that we bridge that gap and reduce it with 1 billion in less than 5 years.
And let's tackle the full 2.6 billion. Hans, it's an inspiration. Thank you very much. Keep up with the running. Keep up with the marathon.
Thank you.
We appreciate it all so much.